Mr. Greenberg, Mr. Greenberg!
Hello there, student me.
I'm taking the SAT next month, and I'm trying to improve my vocab. Can you recommend any good vocab lists?
Well, for starters, have you checked out the list on my own website, Ivy League Mentors Prep? There's a link in the comments.
Yeah, and it was super helpful, don't get me wrong, but now I'm trying to learn more words. Do you know any other good lists?
Well, I'm sure you'll find a bunch of lists online. Have you tried Googling SAT vocab lists?
That was literally the first thing I tried, but there are just so many of them, and I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad. So what I was really hoping was that maybe we could go through them together and we could take a look at them and maybe we could even rate them. What do you think about that?
Student me, are you trying to bait me into making another video? Because if you are, you've succeeded. Hello, I'm Nathan Greenberg, founder of Ivy League Mentors, and in this video we are going to be looking at the top 7 Google search results for SAT list, and we're going to be rating them. And because this is the SAT, we're going to do it on a scale of 200 to 800, because why not? Now before we begin, I should mention that although I have previewed these lists to make sure the links work, I haven't spent a lot of time with them. And I'm going to be looking through them pretty quickly, so these are really just hot takes. That said, I've been teaching SAT for 15 years, and I've worked with thousands of students, so if anybody is in a position to be making these hot takes, I figure it's me. I'll also leave a link to all 7 lists in the comments so that you can check them out and make your own judgments. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear about it. But before we check out the list, there's one more thing to do. We need to figure out what makes a list good, so that we have a reasonable criteria upon which to judge these lists.
Mr. Greenberg, I know. A good vocab list is one that has a bunch of hard words on it.
Oh, student me, sometimes it boggles my mind that you'll get into Brown. First, there's really no such thing as hard words and easy words. There's simply words that you don't know and words that you do know. So when students say that a vocab list has a lot of hard words, what they really mean is that it just has a lot of words that they don't already know.
Okay, fine. If you want to get technical, I see your point. But don't you think that a good vocab list should still have a lot of words that students won't know? Because isn't the goal to, learn new words?
Not necessarily. You see, English is one of the largest languages in the world, with roughly 1 million words by some counts. Yet the average adult native speaker only knows about 40,000 of those words. That's really astonishing if you think about it. That means that the average adult native speaker knows less than 5% of the words in the language. But for the most part, that's okay, because there's a very good reason why most people don't know most words. It's because most words are almost never used. And because they're almost never used, they're very unlikely to come up on the SAT. According to the College Board, the words that you will be tested on the SAT are ones that come up often in college-level reading and professional life. So if you're looking at a vocab list and all you see are words that you've never even heard of, well, those are probably not the most common words, which means it's probably not the best vocab.
I guess that makes sense. Is there anything else?
Sure. A good list doesn't just need to include the right words, it also needs to be able to teach you when those words should and should not be used. To do that, it's going to need to have precise and accurate definitions. It's also ideally going to have the part of speech and a sample sentence so that you can have a better understanding of how those words are used in context.
Okay, I got it. So is there anything else you think we should be looking for in a good list?
Not that I can think of. What about you, student me? Is there anything else that you would consider important in a vocab list?
Well, I guess I'd prefer a list that's, nice to look at. I hate it when teachers use ugly fonts.
Fair enough. If you're going to be spending a lot of time with a vocab list, it might as well be aesthetically pleasing. So with that final consideration in mind, let's jump into it. Student me, are you ready?
I was born ready.
So I've just Googled SAT vocab list, and here are the results. As I mentioned before, we're going to be going through the top 7 hits, and we're going to start with number 7 and work our way backwards to number 1. Again, I've left links for all of these lists in the comments, so if you want to check them out for yourself, you can. Now, number 7 appears to be a list called the 1,000 Most Common SAT Words from a website called joepuck.io. Let's check out what we've got. So my first observation is that this list is beautifully formatted. Now, I'm not sure why some of the entries are highlighted, but still, it's pretty gorgeous to look at, so student me is going to be pleased. I wonder if this was actually stolen from a professional textbook. Now, as for the quality, there are several things that I like about this list. It has all the elements that it should: accurate definitions, parts of speech, example sentences. My only real issue is with the selection. You see, it's a very long list, but I have a hard time believing that these are really the 1,000 most common SAT words. Now, some of these words are quite common, but others like abnegation or abrogate or antediluvian, I just can't see them coming up on the test. I feel like this list might have been designed to reflect the pre-2016 SAT, which tested much more obscure vocab. But that kind of vocab hasn't been a part of more recent versions of the test. So, I'm going to have to take off some serious points for that. Still, I would say that many of the words on this list are ones that are likely to come up, so there is a lot to work with, and although this list is certainly not Ivy League material, it does deserve a respectable score. So, let's give it a 680. Now in our number 6 spot, we've got a list called the 100 Most Common SAT Words from a website called Number 2 Education. I wonder why they went for number 2. I mean, couldn't they have been number 1? Were they just being modest? Anyways, let's see what we've got. With only 100 words, that list certainly took a lot less time to get through. Anyways, my first thought is that although this bills itself as the most common 100 words, you are highly unlikely to see any of these words on test day. Now again, maybe this was just made to reflect the pre-2016 test, but still, even still, this list is very questionable. I mean, words like bovine and diluvial, didn't we see that one on the previous test? Oh, maybe that was antediluvian. Anyways, it's super unlikely to come up, and prestidigitation? Anyways, to compound that problem, there are no parts of speech or sample sentences given, and even the definitions seem a little bit oversimplified. Honestly, the only thing that this list has going for it is the fact that it's short, so at least you won't waste much time on it. Let's give it a 360. So coming in at number 5, our next list is called SAT Vocabulary List. Not the most creative name, from a website called Greenville ISD. Let's see what we've got. So this is a pretty long list, which is something I didn't realize when I was getting into it. It seems that it's broken up into 10 lists, each with 10 groups of 10 words, which means that this is a total of 1,000 words, the same as we saw in list number 7. But this list is not nearly as good as number 7 for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, the definitions are pretty vague and imprecise. Second, it does not have any parts of speech or example sentences, which makes it difficult to determine usage. The childish font choices are also not winning any points for it. Now, in terms of selection, I'd say this list also has some pretty major issues. Words like talisman and harangue and plaudit. In fact, very few of the words here seem like ones that would be likely to come up on the test. Overall, I would consider this list a failure on any level, so I'm going to give it a 320. So let's move on to list number 4. This one's called 100 Common SAT Words You Must Know Today, and it's from a website called UniACO. Let's see what we've got. So I was looking at this list and I was thinking, some of these words seem very familiar. Bovine, diluvial, prestidigitation, and then it hit me. This is the same list as number 6. I'm not sure who came up with it first, or if they both stole this list from a third party, but what I can say is that it's not worth stealing because this list is complete trash. I'm going to give it the same score because it's the same list, 360. This brings us to number 3. Number 3 is a list called the Top 200 SAT Vocabulary Words You Must Know from a website called Tutor. 200 words, not 100, so at least we can expect a different list. Let's see what we've got. So with 200 words, I figured this list had to at least be a new one. But as I was looking over it, I experienced a sense of deja vu. Bovine, diluvial, prestidigitation, and I realized it's not the same list, but it looks like they just took the other list and added more words. Or maybe the other websites took this list and cut off some words. Anyways, this one has all the words from the previous list along with some new ones. The definitions are slightly different too, but I don't think any of these changes have made it any better, or worse for that matter. Now I was gonna give this the same score, but as I was looking at it, I experienced about 10 pop-up ads, and I feel like I'm gonna have to deduct some points for that too. So ultimately, I'm gonna give this list a 340. So this brings us to our second hit, a list called the 300 most difficult SAT words, from a website called vocabulary.com. Now, I already have low expectations because, as I mentioned before, the most difficult words do not generally make for a good vocab list. But let's see what we've got. It can't be much worse than some of the other ones. Well, at least we have a different list. Unfortunately, that's about all this list has going for it, because although the words here are different, they're still fairly obscure and unlikely to come up on the real test. I mean, words like adumbrate and blandishment and, well, they don't have diluvial, but they do have antediluvian. God, why do people think this word is going to come up on the SAT? Also, their definitions are not very good. I mean, for antediluvian it says, of or relating to the period before the biblical flood, which I guess is technically true, but in common usage, well, if any usage of this word can be considered common, it's really just synonymous with very old, which is pretty similar to the definition provided in list number 7, the first one we examined together, and so far the only one that we've seen that may be worth your time. Granted, there are a few more common words buried in this list, so I think it's better than that other list that we saw reprinted 3 times in different variations, but not much. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 420. So that brings us to our number 1 search result. This is a list called 262 SAT vocab words you must know from a website called Prep Scholar. I wonder why they went with 262. It seems kind of random, but hey. Anyways, I don't have great hopes based on what we've seen so far, but maybe this list is number 1 for a reason. Let's find out. Well, I gotta admit it, I'm pleasantly surprised. This list is much better than anything we've seen so far. We get parts of speech and example sentences, and the definitions, while not always the most precise, are generally pretty clear and accurate. Most importantly, I'm not seeing words like antediluvian and prestidigitation. In fact, I would say that the words covered on this list are very reflective of the kind that you'll see on test day. Now again, you may know a lot of them already because it's not a list of obscure words, but that's not a terrible thing because if you know a word, you just skip it so it doesn't waste your time. Anyways, I would say that this list definitely deserves its title. I'm not going to give it a perfect 800 because I think there's still room for improvement, but I would give it a solid 760.
So now that we've gone through all 7 lists, a few final takeaways. First of all, most of these lists are really bad. Except for the first hit, and potentially the 7th, I don't think I would recommend any of them to anybody who's studying for the SAT. I suspect that a lot of them were made for the old SAT, the pre-2016 version, which tested a lot of unusual or obscure vocabulary. But that kind of vocab just doesn't come up much on newer versions of the test. I think that's something we can all be happy about. That said, I would like to close with the observation that even with a bad list, you can still make very good progress. The key is not to try to memorize all of the words on the list, but to focus on the words that are going to be most important. And how do I do that? Well, that's a topic I dive into in my video on vocab acquisition strategies. I'll leave a link to that in the comments. But the short answer is this. You know those words that you've seen a dozen times, but you're still not quite sure what those words mean? Well, those are the words that you really want to be focusing on, because if you've seen them a dozen times, you can be certain that you're going to see them again. So by focusing on those kinds of words rather than words like antediluvian and prestidigitation, you're more likely to be learning the kinds of words that are actually going to come up on the test. Although if you've made it this far in the video, you will probably never forget the words antediluvian or prestidigitation as long as you live. Anyway, that takes us to the end of the video. Again, I want to remind you that these are just my hot takes, so if you disagree with any of my ratings, please share your own opinions in the comments. Also, if you have any other vocab lists that you think are helpful and you'd like me to take a look at them, leave those in the comments as well, and maybe I'll give them a rating too. As always, thanks for watching this video, and if you found it helpful, you can show your support by clicking like, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks again, and good luck on the test.